That's for me. Good morning, everybody. My name's Bill Hughes. I'm a partner at Porzio, Bromberg, and Newman. I am joined here today by a very distinguished panel and tax experts. I know that the last thing you probably want to talk about at 9 o'clock in the morning is taxes. But we're all in business. We're all involved in blockchain and crypto in some sort of way. And the idea is, how do we preserve that wealth? How do we plan for the future? So I'm going to ask our panel to introduce themselves and give a little bit of a bio, and we'll start with Garrett.
Gavin. I'm Gavin George. I'm the manager of compliance over at Tax Network USA, and we fix a lot of tax problems. Hopefully, avoid some, and so thank you. So we come across a lot of different strategies.
CJ Whisnant. I'm a California barred tax attorney, also barred with the U.S. Tax Court over at Tax Network USA. And like Gavin mentioned, we deal with a lot of tax controversy resolution, more on the back end, once someone has a problem. So we really want to try to help everyone avoid that.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Deirdre Wheatley-Liss. I am an attorney over at Porzio, one of Bill's law partners. My focus is on the planning side. So here's the thing about tax law. The person who's not sitting here is the IRS, who's superbly interested in all of your assets. But the great thing about tax law is that there's a lot of intelligent planning that can be done if you think about it. And I will guarantee you, if we do a plan and you follow the plan, which is always the issue, you're not going to have to be talking to Gavin and CJ. Having said that, most of the issues are because either a plan is not engaged in and we just have a tax result, or we have created a plan and dotting the I's and crossing the T's is incredibly important. And if you don't do that, you'll be talking to CJ and Gavin. Is that a fair statement of how we work together? There you go.
Well, that's excellent. So how many people here live in Puerto Rico? All right, and your businesses are here. A lot of the belief is that I live in Puerto Rico, I'm not subject to federal income taxes or the federal tax code, and or I have Act 60. It's like I'm on home base. I'm okay. So my first question, and that goes to Gavin, is that a correct statement?
I don't think so.
Okay.
You always have to protect your assets, regardless, because people forget about lawsuits, right? It's not just about taxation all the time, and tax and asset protection are two sides of the same coin. So you constantly have to think in terms of not just what you're going to pay the government, but more importantly, what are you going to pay somebody else if you get in a car wreck or something like that. So I'm typically recommending they will be looking at your crypto assets, and if it's on an exchange, it will be reported via 1099-B. All they have to do is get your wage and income transcripts, and they'll know exactly where your stuff is.
But also, Act 60, if you move here from the mainland, you're still treated differently and subject to the United States tax code, even if for a particular tax year you're not paying federal income taxes. So that is something that we have to take into account. And I'm going to ask Deirdre, what are some of the challenges that we face with individuals who hold crypto and various cryptocurrencies and digital assets?
So just a couple of things to think about. So first of all, if you are an Act 60 Puerto Rico resident, that is a statement that you are making. The government has to agree that you meet all of the tests to be able to do that. And you all can speak more on this, but there's a lot of issues where you actually probably do meet all the tests, but you know what you don't have? You don't have the documentary evidence that you've been maintaining since the day you stepped foot in Puerto Rico to indicate that you actually meet those tests. And having said that, is there anybody in the audience who was not planning on dying ever? Anyone? There you go. I got Jill in the back. I got one gentleman here. So everyone else, when you die, there is a wealth transfer taxation that applies to United States citizens, which applies on their worldwide assets. Candidly, if you had assets on Mars, it would apply to those. And that indicates that if you transfer wealth, and the amount that you transfer, if you're single, is above $14 million, and if you are married, is above $28 million, that the government gets 40% of your wealth. We're also going to talk about gift taxes. So the fact that there's some income tax benefits to being a resident of Puerto Rico does not mean that you aren't subject, Bill, in your point, to the federal tax code.
Well, but also, and this is the weirdest thing I've ever seen, how many people here are Boricua, right? The United States tax code treats those who are native born in Puerto Rico differently than those who move here. So there's a difference in those rules as well. Guys, what do you in terms of the challenges that you see, what other challenges in holding digital assets in wealth preservation do you see?
I mean, I think the key is what you're trying to accomplish. Are you trying to hold, for yourself? Are you preserving for someone else, maybe a beneficiary? You want to gift the cryptocurrency to someone. It really depends on your end goal. And as she mentioned, it's a worldwide look, from the U.S. view as far as when you die. So just because the assets are here doesn't mean they're not touchable. So you have to make all those considerations ahead of time. Only 2 people in the audience are not planning on dying, so everyone else has to, plan accordingly.
Oh, by the way, I do have some free legal advice for you Act 60 people out there for your substantial connection test. In order to show that Puerto Rico is your true home and you intend to stay here, buy a burial plot in Puerto Rico. So nothing says that I intend to stay here more than buying a burial plot. So, Gavin, what do you?
One of the other challenges we see a lot, we were talking a little bit about this, is record keeping.
Yep,
right? Is that, people got crypto in 2011 or 12, you bought some Bitcoin or you bought some Ethereum in 2016 or whatever it is, you have no idea what the cost basis is. You have no idea how many exchanges it's been across, right? And so not tracing these things along the way ends up biting you later. So I'd say start figuring out what your genealogy is now, start figuring out what your cost basis would be on something like that, and then start building that into a plan so that you can not only continue to buy and sell inside of some sort of entity that you can use to control all these things, but more importantly, you want to start figuring out what this looks like when you do pass away, right? And who's going to get it and how are they going to get it?
So Gavin, a question for you. So
Sure.
let's say that I never got around to figuring out what my cost basis is, and I die, and it's in my head. What's my cost basis when I die?
Zero. It means you got it for free, right? You might have spent $10,000 on some sort of cryptocurrency, and now it's worth $3 million, and your basis is zero regardless.
So Bill, just a couple of other challenges just as we sort of wrap up this question. Volatility in the crypto markets, right? So something can be worth, so when you pass away, your cost basis is adjusted to the value at date of death. It's the good thing, I guess, about passing away, is that all of your appreciation disappears when you pass away. But sometimes because of the volatility of crypto, do we value it as of date of death? And then just for your knowledge, we have an opportunity if the value is less 6 months later to do a revaluation. But the biggest issue that we have with all crypto assets is the anonymity and security that attracted you potentially to these assets in the first place. That's great if you know how to access your assets. But for everyone other than our 2 folks who are never going to die someday, the biggest risk that we have is that you die. How do we know about it? How do we get access to it? And then we can go to the position of valuing it. I think that it's some very practical issues that we have to consider.
Well, then let's dive into some of that, some of these things. Guys, what are some of the biggest mistakes that people make in their tax planning? And don't say they don't have a plan. Okay, that's obvious.
All right, well, I don't have a follow-up to that. No, I would say, Gavin mentioned it earlier, record keeping, that's the main thing. We see it with stocks now where, these exchanges, they're not reporting the right cost basis. Okay, well, now what's going to happen with cryptocurrency exchanges that, the IRS it's new territory for them. As Gavin mentioned, we have to have the cost basis. We have to have all the record keeping. So they're not telling us, all right, your cost basis is zero and you're digging through records from 20 years ago. Aside from that, I think the biggest thing is just, consulting with a tax professional and having a plan that you follow. You're making sure that it's, step by step. You're, taking into all considerations the holder of any keys, what's going to happen upon your death. Are there beneficiaries named, in your will? You want to make it as clear as possible so there's no assumptions to be made by the state or the IRS or some, federal entity.
Well, CJ brings up a very valuable point. Deirdre and I, we have a client who started, the create a plan and stick with it for a long time. Deirdre and I have a client who created the most intricate estate plan we have ever seen in 1993. The client is now worth, $50 million? But kept to the plan, and it shielded the assets, and there have been lawsuits, and there have been problems, and there have been issues, but the plan worked. Could we have done it differently? Yeah, we could have worked on the margins, but the plan essentially worked. So CJ, you raised the right idea. Gavin, what do you?
Man, poke holes in your own plan, whatever it is. Look for every variable, and that's the biggest mistake I see when people do these things. Perfect example, they'll say, well, Bill, what happens if you pass away and you have, let's just say $5 million in Bitcoin, right? Well, it transfers to my wife. Okay, well, what if she's in the seat next to you on the airplane when it goes down? Well, then it goes to my kids. They're sitting behind you. Now what, right? And so you have to have plans that look for every eventuality. And you need to consider tax. You need to consider any state laws that may be effective. You may have it may be held by a company that's still on the mainland if you're not a Puerto Rico resident, right? And then obviously you got to consider, how does that transfer occur? Are you using multi-sig wallets? Or do you have just a trustee, for example, who might transfer that for you, right?
Yeah, I was just going to ask that. Being a resident in Puerto Rico, these assets, they be entitled to a trust account, and if so, we're irrevocable here. So if I have all of my inheritance with me, what will those assets go to?
You were getting into one of our next questions, and you know what? That's
Thank
absolutely fantastic. It's perfect. Thank you for the segue. Gavin, go ahead.
Yes, you can absolutely have an irrevocable trust. In my opinion, the key to any irrevocable trust is having a trustee, basically a manager of that trust, who you actually, not to
Trust.
pun, can trust, right? That they're not going to take off with your stuff, which means you want to get someone reputable like these guys or something like that.
So let me just sort of step back a little bit on this. First of all, anybody know how many people do not have an estate plan, notwithstanding all of you are planning on dying someday? Any idea? What's the answer, please, Sir Jay?
Yes, and that's a great point as far as educating, because there's points that many of us as adults, especially trust and taking care of kids, something like that.
Well, yeah, so Jay, the answer, 70% of people do not have an estate plan. And that's actually a lie. You all have an estate plan. If you don't write one, wherever you live, your domicile when you die has one for you, but it's probably not saying what you want it to say. Example, anybody here have kids that are 15, 16, 17? You want your kids to get your $5, $10, $50 million Bitcoin when they turn 18? Do you think they're gonna make good decisions with it? Anyone? Anyone? Okay. So the other problem that we have is that estate law is like the oldest law that we have. We literally inherited our estate laws from whoever colonized us. So for some of us, it's Spain. For some of us, it's the United Kingdom. Okay? It is paper intensive. You cannot go through the process of dealing with somebody's estate without going to a court, bringing them papers, and getting papers signed. The whole nature of it is entirely distinct from the nature of digital assets and crypto assets. So how do we force those to work well together within an entire plan of what we're doing? You talked about whether, it's multi-sig wallets or things along those lines. But in terms of the estate planning, one of the things practically to consider about with your trustee, It's not just that you trust your trustee. Here's the question. Do they have a surety bond or professional liability insurance? So that if they screw up your very expensive assets, you have some very old school recourse to an insurance company in terms of what it is that they're doing. Where does that trustee reside? If that trustee resides within the United States, we're dealing with U.S. taxation. If that trustee is ex-U.S., are we possibly eliminating U.S. taxation of assets, including taxation upon death at 40%? I'm not concerned about your little 20% capital gains tax, okay? That doesn't really bother me at all. How are we setting things up so that we have security of transition? So if I have my crypto in an ETF with Fidelity, what are the things that I can do? First of all, if I die, my executor, Bill, you're my executor for my example, once you're authorized, you can contact Fidelity and they'll give you account information, they'll give you access, and they'll let you transfer it, right? If I have a beneficiary designation that says that it passes to my son when I pass away, then all he has to do is provide my death certificate, and then he gets those assets. That doesn't exist on the exchanges right now. If there is anyone here from Kraken, I implore you, if you're anyone here from Kraken, add the ability to put beneficiary designations on your assets. It avoids all of these problems here that we're going to be talking about in terms of things. With an irrevocable trusts are generally designed for those gift tax purposes. They're designed for tax treatment. They're designed for how we're going to pass our assets. But then we have foreign trusts that are not necessarily gifts that we're making. A gift is a taxable transfer. You can give away $14 million. Anything over that, you're paying that 40% tax, which nobody wants to do. There's a lot of good planning that can be done. It's just harder with these assets, and it has to be intentional. If 70% of people fail to have a plan and they own some real estate and they have an IRA and they have some bank accounts, we deal with it. You guys can talk about, we do detective work, right, to be able to figure out where assets are. But if you have all of your assets in cold storage and no one has the pass key, fun fact, I might have to report for tax purposes that you've got $50 million of assets. The fact that your beneficiary can't access them does not make them taxable when you pass away. So my point, because I know we have a few minutes and I want to let you all give your key points, meet with someone who has experience, and it's not someone, it's someone's, okay, who have experience with tax law, both U.S., foreign, and then the uniqueness of Puerto Rico. Meet with your estate attorney about what your legacy is. What are you trying to leave behind? What do you think is important? That's the whole purpose of what I do. I help families create multi-generational legacies. Bring in somebody who has expertise in digital assets. In our office, it's Jill Williams. She's sitting back there. Jill, wait, there you go. So I don't need to know about all these things. I can, focus on the tax code. Those are the things that you need to do, but fundamentally, you have to have a plan. Just having a hope is going to either create a nightmare, and the worst nightmare is that your family's not going to get the benefit of all the work that you've done.
Well, but you've raised some good points, but some of the trust, and there is actually 2 points I want to raise with you guys. Do I offshore my assets into a foreign foundation or a foreign trust?
It depends on how much you have.
Let's say I have 10 million, which I expect over my lifetime to grow to 20, 30, 40 million dollars.
I'm not opposed to it. I know Alistair. Is he here today?
Alistair's here.
Okay, great. He was talking about the Caymans being a good location for that. I'm open to it as long as I continue to have access to being able to trade it. So I don't want to just park something there and never see it again. I know a lot of people here, they've been buy and hold for a long time. What if I want to trade? So I have to have a mechanism inside of that trust where it makes sense, where I can still trade, I still have access to my assets, and I can hold them there.
And then you still have to plan for the IRS to
Yes.
to question, why do you have these foreign assets? But in a foreign trust, you want to make sure your fiduciary is spot on clean. We've dealt with situations where you have a bad fiduciary who decides to take off with the assets, and that's always an issue. So CJ, so in my estate plan, do I go with a wallet in the cloud, with a hot wallet, or do I go with a cold wallet?
I mean, the attorney in me wants to say there's risk with both, but I think, it depends. the cold wallet, you have more security there, but you have to make sure, does the fiduciary have access to the keys? Does the beneficiary, are they named as a designee to have access? These are things that are common sense that you would think, oh, if I disappear, my spouse has access, but that's not how it works. There's no assumptions made, so you have to plan. It really just depends on where you want to hold the assets, what you want to happen to the assets. If they're cold versus hot, there's different implications as far as, what's currently going on day to day and also the access point. So, I think it really depends, but just whatever you feel most comfortable with, whatever aligns with your plan, the most.
The other challenge is with a cold wallet, you have to store it somewhere,
Right.
right? You put it on a cold wallet, and what do you put it in a safe?
Well, a safety deposit box, I'm dealing with banks in Switzerland that are actually engaged in custodial relationships for hot wallets. So it's kind of cool. We're getting the hook, but if anybody has any questions before we take off, all right.
Can I make a final point?
Yep.
Whatever it is that you do, regardless of the two of you that don't think that you're going to die someday, no one likes talking about their death. It's not fun. There's so much opportunity to have a plan that creates a legacy for your family, to mitigate taxation. We have fun with what it is that we do. Please, just put it on your to-do list for 2025. And if you think you have a plan, go back and revisit it in 2025. You will thank yourself someday as you are sitting counting your virtual millions. So thank you very much.
If one of you does have a question, take some time out. Talk to Gavin. Talk to CJ. Talk to Deirdre. They're here to answer your questions and some of your concerns. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Enjoy the conference.